August 31st, 1944. Fire was spreading across France as the American Third Army surged forward with unstoppable momentum. At its head stood George S. Patton, a commander known for speed, aggression, and relentless pursuit. The stalemate in Normandy had already been shattered. In just weeks, his forces had advanced hundreds of miles, liberating key cities along the way. Now, he stood near the Moselle River, staring east toward Germany. Victory felt close, almost within reach. But at the very moment success seemed inevitable, something completely unexpected brought everything to a halt. It was not German tanks, not fortified defenses, and not even a major counterattack that stopped Patton's advance. It was something far simpler, yet far more devastating: fuel shortage. The powerful tanks that had raced across France now sat idle along dusty roads, engines silent and lifeless. Movement stopped completely, orders came from above, and everything changed in an instant. Supreme Commander Dwight D. Eisenhower had made a critical decision. Fuel supplies were redirected north to support a risky and ambitious operation known as Operation Market Garden, leaving Patton's army stranded. The impact of that decision was immediate and severe. Patton, who had been on the verge of entering Germany, was forced to wait. Frustration burned inside him. He demanded action, insisting that a small amount of fuel could push his army deep into enemy territory within days. He turned to Omar Bradley, urging for support, but the answer remained unchanged. No fuel would be sent. Time began to slip away, and with each passing day, the situation on the battlefield shifted. What once seemed like a collapsing enemy slowly began to stabilize and reorganize. 5 days passed in complete stagnation. It was a short pause, yet its consequences were enormous. German forces used this time wisely. They regrouped, strengthened their positions, and rebuilt defensive lines. The chaotic retreat that once defined their movement came to a sudden end. Ahead of Patton stood a city that had transformed completely. Nancy, once an open path forward, was no longer vulnerable. It had become a fortified barrier. By the time fuel finally arrived, the opportunity for an easy advance had vanished, replaced by the reality of a far more difficult and dangerous battle. Nancy was not just another city on the map. It was a place rich in history and culture, known for its architecture and symbolic importance. However, from a military perspective, it posed a serious challenge. To the west, the Moselle River acted as a natural defensive line, limiting any direct approach. To the east, elevated ridges created additional obstacles, giving defenders a strong advantage. The German command quickly recognized its value. Under Johannes Blaskowitz, forces were reinforced, and the city was prepared for defense with careful planning and strategic positioning. Inside Nancy, fear spread among the civilian population. Residents understood what was coming. They had heard stories about Patton's aggressive tactics and feared the destruction that could follow. The city's leadership faced a difficult choice. In a desperate attempt to protect their home, the mayor and local officials arranged for a secret message to be delivered to Allied forces. The message carried a clear warning. If an attack was launched, German forces would destroy key parts of the city. They pleaded for the city to be bypassed, hoping to avoid becoming another casualty of war. The message reached Allied command and created a moment of uncertainty. Major General Manton Eddy reviewed the situation carefully before presenting it to Patton. Unlike Patton, Eddy approached the situation with caution. He understood the risks and the potential loss of civilian life. He suggested that the request from the French leadership should be considered. However, the decision was far from simple. On one side stood military strategy and momentum. On the other stood an entire city and its people. What happened next would determine not only the fate of Nancy, but the direction of the campaign itself. Patton stood silently, his eyes fixed on the map, then shifted his gaze toward Major General Eddy. Without hesitation, he pointed directly at Nancy. His voice was cold and decisive. He made it clear that history and beauty meant nothing in this moment. What mattered was the river. Those bridges were the only path forward, the only way his tanks could push deeper into enemy territory. The message for the mayor was simple and harsh. Stay down and stay out of the way. The advance would continue, no matter the cost or the consequences that followed. Despite his aggressive stance, Patton was not careless. He understood that a direct assault on Nancy would lead to unnecessary losses. Instead, he chose a different approach. The plan was to cross the Moselle River north of the city at a location called Pont-à-Mousson. It was meant to be a surprise, a quick and silent move that would outmaneuver German defenses. But the plan did not unfold as expected. What was intended to be a tactical advantage quickly turned into chaos, as the enemy had already prepared for exactly this kind of move. On September 5, under the cover of darkness, American infantry moved toward the river in small boats. The water was quiet, and for a brief moment, it seemed like the plan might succeed. But as the soldiers reached the middle of the river, everything changed. Gunfire erupted from the hills. German machine guns opened up with deadly precision. Mortars followed, tearing through the fragile boats and the men inside them. The calm river turned into a killing zone. The 80th Infantry Division was forced back, leaving behind heavy casualties and shattered morale. The aftermath was brutal. Patton personally moved to the front lines to see the situation for himself. What he saw was not victory, but devastation. Broken bodies lay scattered, and fear was visible in the eyes of experienced commanders. General Eddy suggested a pause, recommending time to regroup and bring in more artillery support. It was a logical and cautious proposal. Many commanders would have agreed. Waiting could mean better preparation and fewer losses. It seemed like the safer choice, especially after such a costly failure. But Patton was not like other generals. He refused to accept delay as an option. To him, time was more dangerous than the enemy. He grabbed Eddy and made his position clear. There would be no waiting, no hesitation. If they failed to cross the river now, the Germans would only grow stronger. Every hour of delay would turn the valley into a deadly trap. The mission had to continue. If one path was blocked, another would be found. Retreat or hesitation was not part of his strategy. A new plan quickly took shape. Scouts identified a weaker section of the German line further south, near a bend in the river. The defenses there were thinner, less prepared for an attack. It was a risk, but it was also an opportunity. On the night of September 11th, under heavy rain, American forces moved again. This time, there was no artillery preparation, no noise, no warning, just the sound of rain hitting the water as soldiers quietly crossed the river. Every movement was calculated, every step controlled. As they reached the far bank, tension peaked. A German sentry noticed movement and called out into the darkness. In a split second, an American sergeant acted, silently eliminating the threat before an alarm could be raised. The crossing was successful. For the first time, American forces had established a foothold on the other side. It was a small victory, but it changed everything. Now, the focus shifted from crossing the river to expanding that position before the enemy could react. Time became the most critical factor. Patton knew that speed would decide the outcome. Engineers worked non-stop, building a bridge strong enough to carry tanks across the river. They pushed beyond exhaustion, racing against the clock. By the morning of September 12th, the first tanks began to cross. These were the Sherman tanks of the 4th Armored Division, one of the most effective units under Patton's command. Leading them was Creighton Abrams, a commander known for aggressive tactics and relentless movement. Abrams believed in one simple principle. Movement meant survival, and stopping meant becoming a target. His orders were clear. Do not attack Nancy directly. Move around it, cut off the enemy, and strike from behind. Without hesitation, he pushed forward. His tanks advanced rapidly through the countryside, moving so fast that even maps struggled to keep up. German supply lines were caught completely off guard. Trucks heading toward the front were captured before they even understood what was happening. Inside Nancy, confusion began to spread among German forces. Something was wrong. The expected attack on the city had not come. Instead of facing the enemy at the gates, reports started coming in from behind their lines. The Americans were no longer approaching from the front. They were already inside the defensive perimeter. The situation had changed in a way no one had predicted. What was once a strong defensive position was now at risk of becoming a trap. The trap was closing fast. From the north, the 80th Division advanced, while from the south, the 35th Division pushed forward. Step by step, they moved toward each other, forming a pincer around Nancy. What once looked like a problem, the mayor's refusal had turned into an advantage. Instead of attacking the city directly, Patton had surrounded it. But the battle was not over yet. The Germans were preparing something much bigger, something that could change everything in a single strike. Deep inside his command bunker, Adolf Hitler reacted with anger. Losing Nancy without a fight was unacceptable. He ordered a massive counterattack. Fresh forces were deployed, including the 5th Panzer Army equipped with powerful Panther tanks. These were not weak or retreating units. They were strong, organized, and ready to strike back. The goal was clear: break the American lines, destroy the bridgehead, and rescue the trapped German forces inside Nancy. On September 18th, near Ericourt, The battlefield came alive. From thick fog, German tanks emerged like shadows. They had stronger armor, bigger guns, and greater numbers. On paper, the Americans were at a disadvantage. Their Sherman tanks could not penetrate the Panthers from the front. Even worse, Patton's flank was exposed. If the Germans succeeded here, everything would collapse. The bridge crossing would be lost, and Nancy would be saved by the German counterattack. What followed should have been a disaster, but the Americans fought differently. They had better communication, faster coordination, and crews that adapted quickly. The fog played a crucial role, reducing visibility and canceling the long-range advantage of German guns. Instead of facing the enemy head-on, American tank crews changed tactics. They turned the battle into a game of movement, using speed and positioning instead of brute force. Moving through the fog, American tanks avoided direct confrontation. They flanked the heavier German machines and attacked from the sides and rear. It was risky, but effective. One by one, German tanks were hit where they were weakest. For 4 intense days, the hills burned with constant fighting. Explosions echoed across the battlefield as both sides pushed forward. Reports reached George S. Patton, who remained confident that his forces would prevail. By September 21st, the result was clear. The German counterattack had failed. The 5th Panzer Army was shattered, and the threat to the American advance was gone. The path to Nancy was now secure. Inside the city, the German commander realized the situation was hopeless. Surrounded and without support, staying meant destruction. Despite orders to fight to the end, a quiet withdrawal began under the cover of darkness. The Germans prepared to destroy the bridges as they retreated, hoping to slow the Americans. Explosives were set, and everything was ready. But French resistance fighters intervened. Acting quickly, they cut the wires and stopped the demolition. The bridges remained intact. When American forces entered Nancy, they found a city still standing. There was no destruction, no heavy fighting inside the streets. The mayor, who once refused entry, came forward to meet the Americans. He expected anger, but instead found relief. Days later, when George S. Patton stood in the city, he saw what had been saved. Without a direct assault, Nancy survived. What seemed like a conflict of decisions had turned into an unexpected success. The city was safe, but the cost had already been paid on the battlefield beyond it. In the end, Patton proved something simple but powerful. A refusal was not the end of the road. It was just another path waiting to be found. What seemed like an obstacle became an opportunity, and that decision changed everything. Today, if you visit Nancy, the story still lives on. The bridges remain, the same ones saved by the courage of the resistance. Streets that could have been reduced to rubble still stand, untouched by the destruction that war usually brings. Not far away, near Ericourt, traces of the battle can still be found. Rusted pieces of German Panther tanks lie buried in the earth, silent reminders of the moment when American forces overcame what once seemed unbeatable. The mayor of Nancy feared for his city, and he was right to do so. Patton pushed forward, and he was right as well. In the end, the survival of Nancy was not shaped by one decision alone, but by the clash of two strong wills. One man refused to open the gates, while the other refused to stop. History often remembers victories, but moments like this reveal something deeper. Strategy, courage, and timing can shape outcomes in ways no one expects. Now the question remains: if you were in that moment, what would you have done? If you enjoyed this story and want more untold moments from World War II, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories like this.
Subscribe for more history.